The clock strikes 12, I step into the haze. Whispers call me from 1,000 graves. Shadows dance in corners out of sight. I chase the unknown deep into the night. I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown. The flicker, a chill, a shadowed hand. The unseen lingers where I stand. Through creaking doors and empty halls, I hear the echoes of forgotten calls. I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown. And the eyes that watch from a place unreal, a touch so cold it makes you feel they're near but hidden, veiled in shade. I walk with ghosts I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the first ever episode of Author's Workshop. Today we have my special guest, phenomenal researcher, phenomenal author, and good friend, D.A. Roberts. D.A., how you doing, bro?
I'm doing good. Thank you for the introduction, brother.
You're welcome. You're welcome. A couple quick notes for everybody. I finally got a chance to get back to writing. So to my INR readers, I finished chapter 8 and got chapter 9 done. Hey, Bounty, and started chapter 10. So 8 and 9 is available for Reign of the Draugr, Dawn of Armageddon. That is available on the Patreon. For those of you guys who don't know, the members only, I finally got that video put out on that last paranormal investigation called Ghostly Neighbors. Hey, Robin. That is available on the members only. Next Friday, it will be released to the public. So with that being said, I want to appreciate everybody coming in for this first one. I know I've been trying to get this show put out for a while. Between my schedule and everything going on, it's just been kind of hard, but I am truly blessed and honored to have DA as my first author guest on this show. So I want to personally thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, man.
This show, was kind of talking backstage a little bit. This show is kind of kind of introduce people to authors. I'm going to be reaching out to several different ones, our different writing styles. We each got a similar style of writing, but we also have our main little touch to it. Where you're like, you and Robbie have a lot of the law enforcement side. Same as you and me, though, we also have the military side, which a lot of my stuff is based on military. And like when I was doing Beast of the Ozarks First Kill, which is solely officer based with the touch of military in it, I had to reach out to you and had to reach out to Robbie because it's like, man, I don't know Leo Lango. So, it's you got to kind of hit some people up, look things up too. Because I'm constantly, I send you something like, man, what would you say in this? Or I tell Robbie, say, what's this here? What are you using this? Because things are always changing, evolving, and it's different. And yes, Leo side and military side is similar. Our lingo is also different. So for me, I know as you well, and we can get to that here in a second too. I like to put reality into my books. So any type of lingo I use is actual lingo used for that time. And I know you do. You want to kind of tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, I try to make all of the details in the book as realistic as I can. What we were looking for as fiction writers is we're trying to create what's called suspension of disbelief. If you're trying to tell a story, let's say for example about zombies, you want all the details in the story to be as correct as you can make them so people don't have as big a problem accepting the fact that there's zombies or a supernatural threat or whatever. I look at the little details of the story, like how people speak or, the technical performances of weapons or certain types of vehicles. I look at all of those as the foundation that the story is built on. Because if you get those little details right, if you break that foundation, the rest of the story is going to come crumbling down because nobody's going to believe it. It's kind of like I read a Stephen King book once, and they talked about flicking the safety off of a Glock, and I was like, okay, no, I'm kind of done here. It's just those little details will screw up a story. It's insane how one little thing, one real world detail that we all know, like referring to a magazine as a clip. Gun guys are like, no, you don't do that because clips hold ammunition, magazines feed ammunition. Totally different. A clip just holds the ammunition, and the magazine has a spring in it and actually pushes the ammunition into the weapon. If you refer to one as the other, you lose gun guys. And that's just a small example, but I see those little real world everyday details as the foundation that the rest of the story has to rest on.
Yeah. Oh, what? Sorry, guys. He's knocking my headphones out, so I'm trying to get them fed out from under him and back in my ear, and I just realized my speaker was on. So I was like, "Oh my God, there's an echo going on." Oh, I'm sorry, guys.
It's a good thing it's your dog instead of mine.
Yeah. Well, Boar's trying to as well.
Well, Harley's 100 pounds, pretty much. If he was in my lap, everybody would know it, because all you'd see is him up here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Boar. He's like Snow. He's become addicted to being on the internet. So anytime I'm live, he's like, "I want people to see me," and I'm like, "Dude, you're too big." Yeah, like wow, I learned something new today. Cool details. Yeah, that's what I love about doing this. And like I said, this show was recommended by the members only, so I was happy to do it. But I find, because I'm constantly in the infinite words of Robbie Jed Rains, I'm consulting the Googles, constantly doing that, constantly looking at maps, getting on Google Maps, because I want my terrain to be correct. I want my information to be correct. We just kind of talking backstage, like this book I'm currently working on. The gun systems in 2019 is completely different than the gun systems now. So I was like,
depends on the system. Research. I mean, some of them have been around for decades. Like their standard AR platform has not really changed much since the 70s, but it's still your simple gas block, bolt carrier group, spring assist. So the basic concept really hasn't changed much, but the design of weapons, the types of weapons are, quite a bit different. However, if you said somebody's got an AR, generally that's about all you've got to say.
Yeah. So like me, I'm always looking up like MP4s, and stuff like, and list goes on and on and on. You may have to. Oh, crap, the chat jumped on me. Sorry. Yeah, you may have to, Robbie, because I love it. I put in the chat the other day when you guys were working on your book Monday. I was like, you've got to make a shirt that says one must consulteth the Googles. Hey, Monisha. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is so it's always because you do have new gun systems. Like there's new gun systems that I wrote in Beast of the Ozark that wasn't around in 2014. They were something different. Now, have they been modified? Have they been reworked? That happens from time to time too. Maybe they have one that failed and didn't work correctly, but it was prominent then. It's not now, and they've improvised it and fixed it. So the how it looks, what type of magazines you could buy for it, how many rounds are in the magazines, all that stuff, you kind of looking up, constantly doing. The type of military vehicles. I mean, that was another one we just kind of talked about. Yeah. Yeah, Sigwell. Heck yeah, man. So like I was looking up back in when I first came in the military, and back in your time, we had, we called them we had the 5 tons,
Mhm.
and the old nut busters, the 5 tons.
Mhm.
And they don't have them no more. Now they went to the MTV, and so things are different. So I'm looking up. Okay,
You
what
can
was
still
this
find
vehicle
those
in
old
this time
5 tons
frame?
in a
Which I
lot of.
knew it.
You can find a lot of those 5 tons still in reserve units, because most reserve units are at least a generation behind on equipment.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. So I was like, okay, what vehicles? Because we rode around MRAPs, we rode around in Strikers, we rode around in MTVs, we rode around in so much different type of stuff. Back then, most of our operations that I did in the Marines was out of the back of the CH-53. We had tested the Black Hawk during my time in the Marines, but the Black Hawk was predominantly Army, where we were still using the CH-53 from Vietnam, because it just, for us, it worked better. So when you're talking about it, what type of military unit is it? Well, you got to talk about, okay, what kind of vehicles did they use? What kind of crafts? Because we had different vehicles and crafts in the Marines versus what the Army always had the newest, latest, greatest thing. Marines always had the hand-me-down. So we got the new stuff a few years after the Army always did. But we made it look good. Yeah, 13 and yeah, the M900 series. And when you got the what is that huge? We called it a Hercules, but that wasn't the name of it. That huge 18-wheeler.
The Hemet?
Yeah. No, not a cargo, not a Hemet. Which I mean, we drove cargo Hemets, but Hemets are many different styles. It's the 18-wheeler, the big, massive, hulking 18-wheeler they had in the Army. Uh, I can't remember.
I wasn't an 88
What
Mike.
it
I
was
couldn't
called.
tell you. I didn't deal with the trucks.
I wasn't either. They would come
What do
through
you call them
they'd
in the
come through the
jarheads? You call
cob
them Motor
and
T or something like that?
yeah, Motor T. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
like
88
Chris
mics in the
Farley, he
Army.
was Motor T.
Drew
Yeah,
Carey
88
was.
mics. Yeah, like in the Army, you're known as a 11 Bravo for basic infantryman. A
No
basic
300 series in the
infantryman in the
Marines.
Marines, you're an 03, yeah, 0311, which I was an 0331 machine gunner. So that's why, what, well, can't pull it down, can't see it, but I was an 0331 machine gunner. I shot primarily the 240 Golf, and but we also shot the Mark 19 and the 50 cal. So depending on the situation, depending what it was, my primary was the 240 Golf.
Ah, the Mark 19, the good old Yeetus Deletus.
Yeah, I love, man. There's nothing more satisfying than hearing that thump, 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 and then a few seconds later, boom, boom, boom. I just love it.
Yeah, the Mark 19 is when you absolutely positively have to eliminate a grid square right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Well, and we also used it for another thing in the Marine Corps, like when we were fighting urban combat. Okay, if we needed to get into a building and we had no good way of getting into that building, which we're known to go through sewer systems to get into buildings, because some of them sewer systems in the Middle East is actually in a building and not out in the middle of the street. So we do utilize sewer systems too. But a good way is take a Mark 19 with an HEDP round, high explosive dual purpose round, hit the side of that building and create your own entry point. I mean, that is another thing they're good for too.
Or you can always cut a hole in the wall with a Modus.
Yeah. Well, 50 cal, 50 cal would also do it. Hey, or so, a heck of a good job of making an entry point too, but Mark 19's quicker. So, it's fun because all these statistics you got to put in there. So when you're writing about this type of stuff, you have to know these statistics. Like in my time in the military, a machine gunner's lifespan was 7.3 seconds. If we was ever discovered, I literally had 7.3 seconds of survival time. That either I took out the enemy or I got taken out. I mean, that's what it was.
Hey, that's a long time compared to what we had. I was a radio operator. You key the mic and you've got 1.2 seconds until a missile hits you.
Yep.
So you better be moving when you're keying up.
The only two that's got a shorter lifespan than a machine gunner is the radio man is number one, the shortest lifespan. Number two is an officer, and he's only like a second, maybe a second behind the radio guy. And then it's the machine gunner and vice versa. So, I mean, the
Army has a job called the ground surveillance radar technician, and these guys will crawl out between enemy emplacements and ours, and install these little sensor pods in the ground to monitor enemy movements. And those guys had the nickname. They were 96 Romeos, and they used to refer to them as biodegradable pop-up targets. Because they stick their head up, they're getting shot.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like an LPOP. An LPOP, you're out there in front of everybody, and you're trying to keep an eye on the enemy movement. So you got the old system radio, where you dig a trench, you run your line, you ring it. You can also electrocute people with it. Just saying. you turn that little wheel. You connect the wires to it to somebody else, it would make a shock. But transport, you can communicate that way. Or, back then we got to use those from time to time. Our most primary communication system was a Prick 19. That was our most common radio system we used, which was great because we used to get a boot, which a boot is a Marine fresh from boot camp. We'd get them in and say, hey, man, go to the company gunny and tell him you need a Prick E9. Thinking that, telling me it's a radio communicator, and he'll go up to the company gunny. Hey, company gunny, we need a Prick E9, and watch them get your butts chewed. It's hilarious. Then we got chewed out later for it. So, but yeah, we had some good stuff, and then right at the tail end of my Marine Corps career, we got them smaller, which was the Prick E9s. We got the smaller ones, the Prick E9s, which was great. Now, what
the Army phased out the Army phased out the ANPRC systems. The Prick 19's like Vietnam era tech. There was the Prick 72, the Prick 92. Nobody liked carrying them because they were heavy and the batteries would explode. But by the late 90s, they'd switched completely over to the sync guard system.
Yeah, that sync guard system is what I was trying. I couldn't remember the name of it off the top of my head. That is what we started getting at the tail end of my Marine Corps career, which was a lot smaller, a lot lighter, a lot more compact, a little bit more features to it.
A lot more range.
Yeah, because when I first went into Corps, we were still using the old flak vest from Vietnam, which I absolutely loved that flak vest. That Molly system they came out with, I absolutely hated it, because it took away from my firing position. It didn't allow me for comfort of holding my rifle. I was not a fan of the Molly system. And in my Army career, they updated the Molly system, which made it a little bit better. But you got that little pocket of meat right here, and that's where you want your butt of your rifles, in that pocket of meat. And with that Molly system, it was hard. I mean, almost impossible to get the butt of that rifle into that pocket of meat. And buddy, you are being very distracted, so stay down there. Sorry, guys, he's being a pain. And the Molly system took that away. So yes, it provided more protection for us, unlike the flak system that we had prior. But the flak system provided more mobility and better shooting. How do I want to call it? A more of a. It was more shooter friendly than the Molly system.
Yeah. I'll take a modern plate carrier over that flak vest any day of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's. I'm not going to lie. I mean they do provide more protection, but us Marines doing what we did. I mean speed and mobility was.
I'm surprised you would
and
prefer a
just
modern plate carrier because it's about half the weight of that old flak jacket.
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to utilize a modern plate carrier, so I have no dog in that fight when it comes to the mobility or the use of it. I'm only familiar with the flak system and the Molly system. So, I mean, from what I've seen on these modern plate carriers, I think they would be better. Now, the one thing that the Marine Corps invented that I absolutely love is called dragon scale armor. And now Special Forces got dragon scale armor. And that provided protection all the way around, mobility, and everything.
Congress killed that.
Yeah.
They decided that was just too heavy a price tag to pay for one guy.
Yeah. Like a lot of things. I mean, like
it worked. It was effective. It was just expensive.
Yeah. Well, when I originally wrote Ihan Jar Book 1, Emergence, that sci-fi book, it was based off of the Marine Corps exoskeleton that they were working on when I was in. And it's funny as hell because I never put any rights to it, never got it published. And then shortly after, Halo came out. And I was mad because I looked at that Halo suit. I said, that's the Marine Corps exoskeleton that they're working on. And that was my idea. So when I finally got around to rewriting that book and publishing it, I had to change things on it because of Halo. But that Halo suit is based off the Marine Corps exoskeleton that they were coming out with in the late 90s.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're working on some nice things. I mean, and in your books, like the Wild Hunts, I love that because it's using futuristic style military equipment. And
most of it's based off modern gear. It's based off real technology.
Well, I was talking about like the just brain farted. The shelters.
The mimic units.
Brain farted off. Mimics, thank you. Mimic units. I was talking about that because we didn't have that when I was in. The mimic unit, that we didn't know about it.
I got a phone call from a buddy of mine who is still in. Let's just say he works in the SF community. I won't say what branch, I won't say where or in what capacity, but he's in the SF community. And after book 1, Odin's Call came out, he called me and he's like, where did you come up with those mimic units? And I said, I just took existing technology and kind of took a guess. He goes, we don't call them that, but we've got those.
Wow. Yeah, see, I mean, and I never knew because like when I was in the Marines, we stayed in either a shelter half or a poncho worked good too in a quick situation. Or we stayed in the big, I've used a poncho a few times as a shelter. It works.
Hey, you can survive anywhere with a good whoopee and a poncho.
Yeah, I mean, in my poncho liner, I love that thing. You talk about something that like provides instant warmth. In the Army, it's called a whoopee. In the Marines, we call it a poncho liner. That poncho.
That's what it is. It's a poncho liner. We just call it the whoopee.
Yeah. So, and that's what I love on that aspect. And that's what drove me to your books. I mean, we write similar stuff. We write cryptid horror. I like cryptid horror science fiction. I do modern day cryptid horror. I do historical fictions, and I do sci-fi, and I'm working on a fantasy and a murder mystery. So when I'm reading your stuff, I'm getting into it because I'm I may not know the equipment you're talking about, but I'm familiar with that type of equipment because of the military. And that's what, to me personally, what draws me to your books is its familiarity. I know where it's coming from because I've got a concept of it one way or another. I've got a concept. So, and I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure you do that on purpose, but I just forgot my question off the top of my head, but that's okay. I got caught up here trying to get caught up on the comments. I got sidetracked, but and that's what I love. So, what I'm kind of interested. What drew you into writing cryptid horror? I'm real curious about what drew you into that.
I've been fascinated by cryptids and Bigfoot in particular since the mid '70s. The first time I saw those old Leonard Nimoy in search ofs, and the first time I saw the Patterson Gimlin footage. I'm 55. I was about 5 the first time I saw that video, and I've kind of started a lifelong obsession. And I've been researching cryptids and going out in the woods and looking for cryptids since I was old enough to go. I mean, we lived out in the country. I grew up on a farm, so if I wasn't doing chores or at school, I was out in the woods. And so it just kind of really inspired a love of that. And growing up in the '70s on a farm in rural Missouri, we didn't have cable. We had 2 channels on a good day. I didn't watch much TV. My nose was in a book a lot. And from as long as I can remember, I've wanted to write my own stories. And I wrote a lot of crap when I was a kid, and it was all bad. I mean, the stuff I wrote when I was a kid will never see print because it was horrible. But every writer has got to start somewhere. And I just polished my skills over time, and I was in my 40s when I finally felt like I'd written something worthy of being published, and just kind of gone from there.
That's interesting because I loved writing too, although I'm dyslexic. So reading and writing is extremely hard for me. It's not that I know what I want to say here, but taking from here and putting it on paper is like really, really, really hard for me to do. So I mean, I'm constantly using things to try to help improve my writing, and through my books, you'll see it progress. So that's because thanks to you and other stuff that I've done, I've found things that helps me to write. Because of that. And that's why I always encourage people, regardless if you don't think you can write, but you want to try it. I got dyslexia and I write books. I mean, it's you can do it. There's things that can help you, and so I'm always about that. And I'm a student of history. One of my favorite subjects is history. That's why I put historical cryptid, historical cryptid horrors. That's why I love to write that because I love history. My historical fictions. I love writing that stuff because that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about the military. I'm passionate about cryptids, about paranormal, supernatural. So that's why, for me, that's why I wanted to put that out there, and I wanted to combine stuff and change things up and do things a little different than other people do because that's just who I am. And I'm pretty sure this is the same for you. But when you write a book, you are in that book. That's essentially you're putting yourself into that book. So there's always going to be an element of you in that book. I mean,
Well, for an author, literally everything, or not necessarily even an author, a writer, for anybody who writes, literally everything you do in life is research. Whether you spent time as a cop, spent time in the military, if you were a seamstress, you know how to write that kind of character. If you were a doctor, if you were a paramedic, anything you've ever done in your life is fuel for your writing. So you always need to write what you know and write what you're passionate about. Like, for example, I could probably take a pretty good guess at writing a character who was a Marine, because I've known lots of Marines in my lifetime. So I could probably come pretty close, but I was never a Marine. So I would probably, be picking your brain or my buddy Terry's brain or any other number of jarheads that I know. I'd be picking their brain on terminology and things like that because it's different. I mean, the culture's different, the mindset's different. But I could probably fake it pretty well. But at the same time, if I was going to write a story from the perspective of, say, a forensic pathologist, I'd have to go talk to one because I don't know the lingo. I don't know how it works. It's just one of those things that if you're going to write something and you don't know about it, you should probably do your research. It is much better to write from a point of view of experience than it is to just guess, because you will get the details wrong. You'll get the terminology wrong. You'll get the lingo wrong. So you can write anything you choose to write. Just do your research. Google will only tell you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly on that. Like in my book, there's always an essence of my family history or my family or myself in it. I refer to that stuff quite often in my books because that's what I'm familiar with. I know my family history. I know me. I know where we come from. What. So that's all. That's why I like that, because that's something I know from growing up to listen to stories from my great grandfather, and other members of my family. And upon researching my family, that's why I put there's always an essence of me, my family, or my family history in my books. In fact, in Cody Barrett's Start of a Legend, which is the western I'm working on, my family's in there because that area and that time frame that this book is written in literally was when my family was there. My family was co-founders of Anderson County, Missouri. Before then, it was known as Snake County. Okay, and then it was also known as something else prior. But I remember Great Grandpa telling me, he goes, "No, we called it Snake County back then." I can't remember what it was off the top of my head originally before it was changed to Anderson County. So my family has a deep history there, and that's so when I was writing that, I had to put in there my family because that was legitimate families that was there. And you'll also run into stuff like I did on that book as well. As I wrote in a bad guy in that book that Cody and the others are going up against, a land grabber, a Union officer that's grabbing up lands around Buffalo, Missouri. Come find out, I didn't know it until I was at the Historical Society doing research on that area in that time frame. That was a legitimate family name in that time frame. So I had to change it up because it's like, oh crap, I didn't know that. You couldn't find that in the Google searches because most of the history from Buffalo was lost prior to 1869 because of fires from the Union and from the Confederacy burning that place down multiple times.
Mm-hmm. It's always best to
So,
incorporate actual history where you can.
mhm. Yeah, and I do this, and I'm going to probably take a guess you do this too. You don't always put the original name of the county in there, uh, because you don't want that. I don't do it because I don't want something to come back on me. So I always go to the old version when I'm writing.
I changed the name of the county slightly. Like in my Ragnarok books, I referred to uh, Greene County as Nathaniel County. It's because Greene County
Hmm.
was named after Nathaniel Greene. Uh,
Hmm.
and I read long ago when I first started publishing that if you were going to use an elected official's title and name, you had to have the written permission. So I just changed the name of the counties anytime I use a county government. Like for example, Laclede County, I call it Lackland County. Stone County, I call it Sloan County, and it just goes on. I just change it slightly, but if you can still use places like city names and stuff like that, but you can't use like the sheriff of Stone County because that's an elected official's title. So I just change up the name of the county slightly, and anybody that reads the book will know exactly where I'm talking about if I say Kimberling City, Missouri, and Sloan County.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I agreed. Like this book I'm working on now takes place in St. Joe, which is Buchanan County. Well, I couldn't use that name because of the sheriff's department and stuff like that, so I had to go back to the original name, which is Roberts County. I had to change it
My
up
county.
because, yeah, I laughed. I can't remember if I sent you that or not. I meant to, and I may have forgot. I was like, "Hey, I found your county." Its original name was Roberts County. And so I laughed because when I seen that, I started dying. I didn't know that. I'm from St. Joe. St. Joe is where I was born and raised. Hey, Jessica. And I didn't know it was known as Roberts because I've always known it as Buchanan County. So that's what I was. And that's another thing about when you're researching for this stuff. I don't know if it's for this way for you. Like I said, I'm a student of history. So I just learned something new from there, from my home area that I didn't even know, and I'm from there.
Well, I mean, you when you start digging into the history of an area, you learn all kinds of interesting things. Like I'm sure everybody's familiar with the old cowboy movies where they go out in the street and face each other down and draw their guns and kill each other. That actually happened very few times in the Old West. And the first time it actually happened for real was right here in Springfield, Missouri on the square when Wild Bill Hickok killed Davis Tutt at a range of 75 yards with a smoothbore Colt 1859.
I still, man, that blows my mind hearing those facts, and I've known about them facts for a long time. But I was like, how? Just how could he done it at that yardage with a smooth bore?
He
I mean, that was
practiced
just gotta be good.
constantly. That man was lethal with those pistols.
Yeah, yeah, he was, man, he was. And so, I mean, and that's what I love. And you put that in your Western cryptid horror.
Dark
I
Frontiers.
almost called it out. Yeah, thank you, because I almost said Robbie's Robbie's books off the top of my head. I was like, nope, wait, I gotta quit. Yes, that's not right. That's Robbie. But you, when in Dark Frontiers, you put that in there, and I got a kick out of that because that's factual history. You can literally look that up, and it's there. You know,
I've
and that's
been
what
to
I
the spot
love.
where it happened, and I've been to Dave Tutt's grave. He's buried right here in town.
Yep, yeah, he is. I believe. Is it the one that's off of Battlefield, the cemetery off Battlefield, if memory serves me correctly?
Now, do you know where the intersection of South Street and Grand is? If you go down South Street toward Grand, it actually South Street actually ends at the entrance of that cemetery. I can't remember the name of the cemetery, but it's right there. It's right there on Grand Street at the end of South Street.
Okay, yeah, man, it's been
I could take you right to it if you want to see it.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to remember the last time I've been down that road. Man, it's been 12 plus years since I've been down on that part.
Last time Robbie and Doc was in town, I took him to the grave.
Oh wow, yeah. People don't realize how much history is in Springfield. There is a ton of history that people don't know that's actually Springfield, Missouri, that took place. And that's one thing. I mean, you got to be a student of science science. You got to be a student of history to know it. But there is so much that we know through historical records that we don't realize is actually from Springfield, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the birthplace of Route 66.
Yes, it was. It's towards the middle of the cemetery. Yep. Yeah, man, it's been a long. Oh no. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry. What is your deal today, bud? You're being a bigger pain in the butt than usual. Come here, get to your spot. Okay, producer. You're in your producer spot. He's got a little spot here on the side of my desk that he likes to set when I don't want to hold on to him because he's moving around. So when you're doing research, you do something I like to do as well, and you take actual encounters either you've had or that you've came across in your books, and I love that technique. Can you describe that a little bit for us?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I've been investigating, cryptid stories and reading every book I could find on the subject and talking to people since, the late 70s. And what I do is I take these stories that and personal experiences, because I've been out in the woods a lot. Robbie and Doc have been with me. You and I did a paranormal investigation together. But I go out and investigate these places. And when I hear a story or I have an encounter that happens to me, I use what happened to base the behaviors off of encounters in the books. So the creatures are acting the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, and I like that. And to me, not only do I like that stuff from the aspect of a writer's point of view, but it's also for a researcher's point of view. You're constantly building upon your theories. For me, writing is very similar to building up theories, and that's you're constantly evolving. You're constantly coming up with new things. For me, I don't know about you, but like for me, a number of times I've had a certain ending to a book that I wanted it, and all of a sudden I come back and go, wait, this would be better, and I'd change it up. I'm constantly evolving it because either A, how the storyline itself goes, or B, because it makes for a better ending. And is that something you run into quite often?
Oh yeah, I mean, theories evolve over time, and yeah, I try to constantly learn. I'm always reading, other researchers' notes. I'm always reading encounter stories, reading new books on the subjects. So I'm always trying to explore the phenomenon, both paranormal and cryptid, and especially in the places where they overlap. So I can write and also evolve my own personal theories based on observed data and other people's firsthand encounters. So because if you think you know all the answers in this field, you've already shut your mind down to anything new. You've got to constantly evaluate what's happened to other people, and change your theories based on those encounters. Because if you don't, you're just going, okay, well, I'm not going to take all of these stories and just going to throw them away because they don't jibe with what I believe. And you can't do that. I mean, even if you don't agree with it, you still got to take it, at least factor it in. And there's like people when they say, for example, when they say something like they believe Bigfoot can cross over to other dimensions. I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying it can't. I don't know, but all I can say is in my personal experience, I've never encountered anything like that. But I know people that have talked about stuff like that, fairly extensively. And again, I will not contradict them. I won't say they're wrong. I won't say they're making it up. I'm just saying it's outside my experience. So, I can't say, who's right. I can't say who's wrong, but I can go with prevailing theories and observed data and things that have happened to me in particular.
Yeah. Sorry, I read a comment wrong. My bad, Candy. I was trying to quickly read yours and listen to D at the same time, but that's good. We'll keep going. And I agree with that. So some of your books that you've been either a part of or people may not know of is like Cold Hunger.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of I think that was the second book of yours that I got on audio, which it's not a bad read. It's not a bad read.
Well,
And,
I co-authored that with another writer.
Right. Yeah. And it was good, and you can see a lot of the differences. And it's. I still recommend people buying the book. It was still a good listen and a good read. So I mean, if you get a chance, look that up. It's D.A. and I can't remember who was the other author on that.
Kat Dahman.
Thank you. That was it was interesting, and it took a whole new another look at a certain event in history, and kind of, to me, it seemed like it modernized it a little bit. I could be wrong, but to me, that's how I kind of looked at it when I was listening to the book Cold Hunger.
And that was our intent.
Yeah.
We intended to take the story of the Donner Party and retell it as a cryptid story. But having done that, it was a great process. I enjoyed working with Kat, but you can still see that book was fairly early in my career, and my writing has evolved since then, and so has Kat's. If you're a writer, if you're a student of your craft, if you read, and first and foremost, as a writer, you need to be a reader. You need to read everything you get your hands on, because it helps you improve your own writing. But as a writer, I try to improve my books with each successive book. And if you're not doing that, you're really doing yourself a disservice and your readers a disservice, because you want to constantly challenge yourself. You want to constantly improve your writing. And I think looking back at that, there are things I would do different now, but I think for when it was written, it's a good book. I just would have changed some things up and done things differently now because I've learned a lot of lessons since then. But yeah, it's one of the great things I enjoy about writing is some authors see other writers, other authors as their competition, and I don't. The only writer I'm in competition with is the writer I was yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. I was laughing at Candy's comment here. I mean, ED was giving Robbie a spot to sit on his desk. That's awesome, Candy. Um, Another one of your series, which is the third book that I ever bought, because the first one was codenamed Wild Hunt.
Mhm.
Then I bought Cold Hunger, and then I bought, and I love this one, and it's not mentioned very often, but it's a highly recommended. Me personally, I highly recommend people buying this book and reading it, and that is Lost Legion. That
I had a
was your
lot of fun
sci-fi
writing.
book.
I had a lot of fun writing The Lost Legion because it's a sci-fi book and it's set, 500-600 years in the future, but the the history behind it is corporations have taken over basically everything, and they're building their own militaries. And in order to give these guys a military identity, each of these corporations base their militaries off of something from Earth history. And the book focuses around a group that was designed after the original Roman Legion. So I had to do a lot of research on the Roman Legion, and and then take that and extrapolate where the Roman Legion would be 500 years in the future. And I had a lot of fun writing that because I got to use old style Roman Legion tactics with modern equipment and dropship armor. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and it's oh my god, the story in which I never realized it till I listened to Man's Marauder, how Man's Marauder tied into Lost Legion, and how the three books kind of just flow together. It's beautiful. It's art,
I
and
appreciate
that's
it, man.
another
Thank
one
you.
of your sci-fi books. You're welcome. And that's another one of your sci-fi books that I highly recommend people reading and listening to is Man's Marauder. And would you kind of go into a little bit of details on that book, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. I was always a fan of the David Drake Hammer Slammers novels, and they're great sci-fi novels. And I thought, I should do something along those lines. And so I designed a mercenary unit that they lost their own planet, and so they just formed this military unit, and they to survive they fought wars for other people. And it's about this group called Man's Marauders that take contracts and go fight wars, fight wars on different planets, or engage corporate forces or whatever their contract is for. But they use hover tanks, and so I used real tank commands, real tank. Talked to a couple tankers I know, so I could get the tank tactics down. But it's all way advanced technology, and I was inspired again by the David Drake books, but I think I took it in a slightly different direction. And what I tried to do was to give them the same kind of military style camaraderie that I did in the Codename Wild Hunt books, because to me it's not just about capturing the terminology or the technology; it's about capturing that esprit de corps, that bond of brothers that warriors have, and the banter between the team, the tactics. I tried to really make that as much of a family unit as it was a military unit. So yeah, that book was just a lot of fun to write, and I really enjoyed the way that went. And I've got some big plans for the sequel.
Awesome. I'm going to hit a couple things up out of them two book series that I absolutely loved that I thought brought the book to life and really caught an interest. In the first book of Lost Legion, they got trapped in like a, how do you put it, a time loop, okay,
Yeah,
in a deal, and not Claudius, no, it wasn't Claudius, the main guy in that, I forgot his name off the top of my head.
Marcus.
He
Marcus.
Marcus, thank you. Marcus relives a tragic moment thousands of times. over and over and over. And you, when you start reading this, you start putting yourself into that character. It's like, dude, that would jack my brain up because I don't know if I can live with that same tragedy thousands upon thousands of times over and over and over and over and over because that would just you'd go insane. And the fact that Marcus was able to hold it together, constantly evolving his technique, constantly trying to figure out how to solve that puzzle. It's I
It's
loved it.
because
I mean,
it's because the discipline of the Legion is supreme.
Mhm.
Their discipline was
Yes,
unbreakable. And
yeah,
the second
and it
one,
is, and
you really got to see the Legion perform together. The first one was called
yes,
Lost Legion Perdition's Flames. The second one is Lost Legion Blood and Honor. And in Blood and Honor, you actually get to see the Legion fight. And I was super
mm.
proud of how that turned out. It was
Oh,
Starship Troopers meets Halo meets Gladiator.
I honestly, when I was listening to that one, I was like, dude, Starship Troop or yeah, Troopers. Sorry, allergies are still messing with me. They're finally slowing down. I
As
mean, because
cool as
that's
that
what
sounds, it would be
I
absolutely terrifying to get dropped from orbit.
oh man, yeah, that takes like the Marine Corps exoskeleton times 1 billion to be able to survive a fall like that. Just, I mean, you're burning up. I mean, you have a burnout in atmosphere because your shielding or your plating fails. Oh god, that's just a horrible. I mean, you burn out in atmosphere and then you plummet to the ground and your chutes don't give out. I mean, that's just you start thinking about this stuff when you're reading this, like, oh god, this would suck if this happened. And that's what I love about writers because I grew up on Louis Lamar. I grew up on the Hardy Boys. I grew up on Pick Your Own Adventure. So it was books that, even though it was very difficult for me to read, I was able to get in them. And that's what I love about Lost Legion, Man's Marauders, and all your books is you can actually get in there and you start becoming that character. And to me, that's what makes a awesome author is when he can write a book and you can actually see yourself as that character and you start living his emotions and you start thinking fears that would literally go through his head. Like Marcus, man, I hope I don't have a burnout dropping in, through atmosphere because this will happen to me and it'd be like this. I mean, and that's what makes to me that's what makes a good author, and that's what I find in your books is that type of um, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, the best books that I enjoyed, books I've read many times by different authors. The books that I've always enjoyed the most were the ones that made you invested in the characters, the ones that made you emotionally invested in the life of this character. And even in the truly great ones are the ones where you can see yourself reflected in that character. Like the first time
Mhm.
reading Lord of the Rings. I wanted to be Strider so bad I could taste it. I mean, I felt like I was experiencing that world through his eyes. And some of the best books, like Jack Higgins' A Prayer for the Dying, Martin Fallon, the character in that, you just feel for that character, and at the end of it, you just feel at the end of that book, you just feel emotionally exhausted. So that's what I try to capture. I try to make all of my books as
Mm.
character driven as possible. And some of these characters just seem to take on a life of their own. A number of these characters
Oh,
just are larger than life, and even in a lot of cases, they weren't even meant to be main characters. They were just meant to be background characters, like Margolin. Margolin was never intended to be much more than just comic relief in the background, but people love it. And there are times when I'm writing that character, like I'm writing dialogue, he'll pop off and say something, and I'll stop, even surprise me, like, where the hell did that come from? It's just because I have such a firm
mm.
idea of who these characters are in my head. And what I like to tell people, that when I'm writing a story, I have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and sometimes the characters let me actually get there. I throw the characters into the situation and let the characters drive the story, and I try to make them react as humanly as possible, but at the same time make them vulnerable. Because nobody wants to read a character that's 9 feet tall, bulletproof, and nothing hurts them. There's got to
Mm.
be an element of risk. There's got to be an element of danger. And if you know anything about my books at all, nobody's safe. I've killed off a lot of characters over the years.
Yeah. Well, like for me, when I write Saga Grimson, yes, Grimson is an immortal, but he's not without damage. I mean, the guy can get jacked up and gets jacked up pretty good. And in book two, you see him actually come very, very close to not being an immortal anymore, but actually being in Valhalla. And that's what I like to put in there because even though he's an immortal, certain things can cause their demise, and that's something they have to keep an eye out for. And I don't want to give too much away for the people that ain't wrote it, but there's a certain part in that book when you read it, you're going to see it, and he's like, "Holy crap, Grimson almost ate the bullet on that one. I mean, he almost bit the dust." And you have to put that in there, even though he's an immortal. And I kind of see that with Gideon, and I could be wrong, but that's how I look at Gideon. Is Gideon does what he does, but dude, he can get jacked up. And there's certain things that you're like, okay, is this going to be his demise? And that's what I love about that type of stuff.
Well, Gideon knows full well that one day he will push it too far. He knows eventually he's gonna fall. He just doesn't know when, and he just gives 110% until that happens.
Yeah, and like in Beast of the Ozarks, First Kill, my latest one I just published, and I agree with you on something you made, because there's a point in that book that I was like, I don't want to write this because I really love this guy, and I love how he's one of the main characters. They're best friends. I mean, they literally went through hell together, and then at the end, something happens to him.
Well,
And I fought.
Mhm. It's like with the Ragnarok series. It's a 10-book series, but I knew from chapter 1, paragraph 1, exactly how that series was going to end. I knew from the minute I first put words to paper that was the only way that series could end. And getting so emotionally invested in the character, and Ragnarok chewed a lot of scenery. Ragnarok killed a lot of characters, but it's the end of the world. A lot of people are going to die. But at the very one of the final scenes, when I don't want to give away any spoilers, but when the inevitable happens, I walked away from the computer for 3 days. I mean, I had to go outside with a 6-pack of beer and just sit in the backyard because I was so emotionally wrung out after I wrote that scene. Even though I knew it from the very beginning that was going to happen, I had so much invested in that character that at the end I was just spent. And I had to literally stay away from it for days before I could go back and write the prologue. No, the epilogue, I mean.
Whenever when I finished up the Ragnarok series, I was in my tractor at work mowing. I literally had to stop for a little bit at the end of it. I knew this was coming, but damn, this sucks. It's like this really sucks. But I get it because you get emotionally involved with them, and I'm just a reader. I'm not the writer. I'm just listening to your books, and even I get emotionally involved on that. Because that's like I said earlier, that's what makes a good writer is when you become emotionally involved. And I'm sitting here, and I remember texting you one time. It's like, oh crap, no, I can't believe this happened. And it's like, never mind, change your plan, because you wrote it where it got me. I was like, damn it, you got me on this one. I think it was something along the lines like, fucker, you got me. Because I was like, this is what happened, and I knew it was coming, and it ended up not being.
There's a character in the Ragnarok series, and I'm not going to say which one in case people haven't read the books, but it's about halfway through the series when this character is killed. And there were a lot of people very upset when that character died. I got nasty emails. I got pretty direct messages like, "What did you do that?" And I was a guest at a convention up in Kansas City, and I had a guy drove to Kansas City from Oklahoma City just to argue with me about killing that character.
Dude, that was a heart wrencher. I ain't gonna lie to you, that was a heart wrencher. when that one, I know who you're talking about. And I was like, no, no, not him, not this dude. I'm not gonna give names away, but I was like, not this dude, no, dude. I mean, I get it because, well, I'm an author too, and sometimes you just have to do it. I mean, that's just how the story goes. But you get emotionally involved with these guys. You live through you feel their pains, their struggles, you feel everything about them, and it happens.
Yeah, like in the last book I published, Lakeview Man, Dead of Winter, I killed a character in that, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. And
Yeah,
I've had people like, "Oh my God, are they coming back?" That kind of thing. But if you go back and read that book with an open mind, there was a reason. It was all about the story arc that has been in the writing. That scene has been coming since the second book she was in.
heck yeah. Well, it is top of the hour. Being as we have you on here, we're going to play your commercial. If you need to get up real quick and get something to drink, it's going to be.
I've got plenty to drink, but I do need to go to the bathroom, so I will be right back.
So, all right, Roxanne, if you wouldn't mind, let's put up DA's information, and here we go, folks. Oh, that got done quicker than I thought. Daggone it. Sorry, folks. Had to top off on my water real quick. For any of those who are not following DA, you can find his books on Amazon. Look up D.A. Roberts. And man, that went quicker than I thought it did. I thought I had a little bit more time. Sorry about that, folks. Look up D.A. Roberts on Amazon. Follow his author's page. Comment on his stuff, rate his books, help him to get his books reached out to more people. And also follow him on YouTube at Nightmare Hunters Podcast. Give him a like, subscribe, and follow, a thumbs up, and say, "Hey, I found you from the fluffy guy that was talking to you the other day." So get out there and follow DA and be a member of his author's fan page on Amazon. You can find his books on hardback, paperback, Kindle, and on audio. And I have literally listened to every single one of them now.
I appreciate that, brother.
You're welcome. Yeah, I know, Freaky. I was like, I got a few more minutes, and I was running there trying to hurry up and not trip over because I forgot to turn the lights on. So I'm not trying to trip over things in the dark that the dogs knocked over and the cats and get to the sink because I forgot to fill my water up before the show. So let's get back into it. And it's one of the things that I was also talking about, and this was on oh my gosh, I forgot what book it was now. It really caught my interest on it. If I can think of it, I'll come back to it. I done brain farted it and forgot which one it is, but it's different stuff in there. Like the time loop in that fog above. I keep wanting to call it Planet X, but it's not X. It's in Lost Legion. But
it's been so long since I wrote that, I can't remember the name of the planet. Not off the top of my head.
I know. I was like, oh gosh, but
something Prime.
Yeah.
It's something Prime. Hakan Prime. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I keep every time I hear it, I think of Planet X from I think it was Star Trek. I don't know why, but that always anytime I hear that name, that's where my mind goes to is Planet X. Um,
Well,
but
I've got two
when
books,
you
two sci-fi books planned as spin-offs of that first book. One's going to be about the pirate crew, and one's going to be about Declan. I'm not Declan, Duncan Kane. The pirate one's going to
Duncan,
be called Pirates Holiday, and Duncan Kane is in the gunfighter. He's in that sci-fi. He's the freighter captain, and that one's going to be called Gunfighter's Destiny.
oh man, I don't know if I should give his name away on there or not, but he has a certain name he's known as in the Lost Legion series, and I start laughing because he reminds me of a certain character from a book series you're working on called Dark Frontier, and
That
I
is
start
intentional.
grinning because
That is
it works,
completely
buddy.
intentional.
Yeah, it works because that's as soon as I was listening, I was like, oh, the name, everything, So I just love it, and that's another thing that brings me into that type of stuff. And then of course you got your fantasy series, which is um, oh my gosh, um, listen to it, Ironheart. Clan Ironheart. And that's not the name of it. Not Ironheart. I
Heart of
remember
Iron.
that was his clan. Heart of
Heart of
Iron.
Iron.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember now because like Ironheart was the clan name, and that's why. Wait. No, that ain't right. But I like that type of stuff, because I grew up playing D&D,
Me
and I
too.
was always a barbarian dwarf. In fact, I've got my D&D set here, and I was supposed to be doing an online D&D with people, but I just not had time. Uh, but I'm always a barbarian dwarf. So when I get to listening to that, I'm always going, "Oh, that's awesome," because that's right up my alley. Yeah, I'm a country boy, but I'm a little bit nerdish too. I grew up on Star Trek and Star Wars, and I grew up playing D&D. And I still love it. I still love that
Oh, me
stuff.
too.
Uh, I probably can't reach it, but I got my D&D book right up there, and my dice and everything's right over here.
Oh, dude, I've
And
got two
so
shelves of game books over here on the wall.
the man, if I can get time to get that online, figure out how to get that online D&D game going, it's something I want to invite more people into doing, and I've got people interested in playing. So uh, that'd be fun. I think it'd be fun to do, man. It's just going back to your childhood, if that makes sense. But and I like that type of writing, and actually, that's what's funny was creating my character for this new current D&D game that I'm trying to get going. Actually, led into a book idea for me, and that's Ophar because that's the name of my D&D character, my barbarian dwarf. So anybody who plays D&D knows you got to write a backstory on who your character is. Well, that backstory led into a book idea. And I don't know if that's something that you've implemented into some of your books, like, you're trying to create something for someone that led into a book idea or not. That for me, that has.
Oh yeah, I mean, basically what helped fuel my creativity to want to write stories was running games for the past 30 years or so. I started playing in '82,
Mhm.
and that really made me. It really, I've always wanted to be a writer, but that really fueled it.
Yeah. And I love fantasy, because I grew up with Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Crawl, Red Sonja. I grew up on all those. I fell in love with you know, um, Lord of the Rings series and stuff like that
Mhm.
because that's right up my alley.
Savage Sword of
I love even
Conan. I mean, yeah.
yeah. God, dude, man, Red Sonja is a really good one too. I mean, people don't know. A lot of people don't know about Red Sonja, but that is a phenomenal book, which was also starred by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not book, but movie. Actually, I think
Did
that was a book at one time. I think
Yeah, Red Sonja was a character by Robert E. Howard, just like Conan. Did you ever read any of the Thieves World books by Robert Lynn Asprin?
no.
That is dark fantasy. It is very gritty, very brutal fantasy. It kind of more like Conan than Lord of the Rings. It's not happy fantasy, it's brutal fantasy, and they are fantastic books.
Oh wow, I got to check into that.
Those are old
You
books
know,
too. They're
I'm
from like the
always looking.
70s, but they are fantastic. Look for Thieves World. Yeah, you
Thieves
will love
World.
them.
You
They are
know that
great.
I like that idea. You know, because so a lot of my stuff is based off of my Norse and Dane background, bloodline. Okay, I mean that's most. I mean, most of my books are based off of that because that's my family history and that's what I know. Now some of the stuff I heard from my great grandpa about our family history, some of the stuff I had to look up myself. But when you start talking about barbarians and you start talking about dwarves and elves and stuff like that, you're really reaching into that Norse mythology and Dane mythology and all that. So I mean that's why I love that type of stuff because it reaches home for me. Um, and that's why I choose that style of writing and that character basis in there is because of that. Um, I'm trying to remember. I had something on Lakeview Man, but now I bring Lakeview Man. How did you get your idea for that series? Which I could tell you, the last one that I listened to broke my heart. I'm not gonna lie to you, it broke my heart.
Uh, Lakeview Man started after uh, an incident that happened in Stone County. A deputy sheriff friend of mine told me about an encounter he had down there in Joe Bald, and it just kind of that just inspired it.
Mm. Yeah, that's I thought so because you got in really good detail. Now the fourth book that I bought was Lakeview Man, and that's where I started my love. I mean, yes, I knew of Clark from the Wild Hunt, and I liked that character, but it wasn't until Lakeview Man that I started really noticing Clark and getting to know Clark and what happened, that tragedy that happened to Clark in that book. That's when I started really getting emotional with having a lot of love for Clark was Lakeview Man, and that was a very well written book. I know the area you're talking about because I'm extremely familiar with that area, and I spent my life around Shell Knob, Missouri. I spent my life around Pineville, Missouri, Springfield, Rogersville, St. Joe, Marshfield, up here, hey Jeff, we got, of course, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but the Dallas County Cannibals, that's my neck of the woods. That's literally a hop, skip, and jump from right where I live. So you hear these stories of this stuff that goes on, in places like Shell Knob. I've told you stories about growing up at Shellwater Bay. There in no, I'm sorry, not Shellwater Bay. That's Australia. Big Bay in Shell Knob. The stuff I experienced growing up there and the strangeness that was there. I also had them same experiences in Pineville. So when I hear you talking about Kimberlin City and the stuff that happened there, I can't help but go, I know what he's talking about. I've had similar experiences in Big Bay there in Shell Knob, and I like that.
Well, I'm glad you like
And
that because that's the kind of thing that goes on here in the Ozarks. There's so much, strange creatures, strange stories, Ozarks mountain folklore. There's so much odd things that happen here in the Ozarks. It's just fuel for books like this. And the Ozark Howler, Bigfoot, Dogman, the vampire beast of the Ozarks. There's lots of different stories of really bizarre creatures, and it's just there's so much here that we can draw on. There's such a rich tapestry of heritage, of storytelling, and of strange and bizarre events that you could spend a lifetime just writing on about stuff that happens here.
yeah, I mean, the Ozarks full of the Fae. Ozarks full of cryptids of all different types and supernatural stuff of all different types and UFOs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of stuff that's here. I've shared that story. The first time I ever had an incident with a Bigfoot was up in Independence, Missouri, outside of St. Joe. And great grandpa said, "Hey, boy, don't go out in them woods. Momo's been spotted." I thought grandpa was spinning me a yarn. I thought he was pulling my leg. And, so we was out playing hide and go seek and tag in the woods, which is the same woods that the cows traveled. They traveled through that wood to get from one pasture to another. Well, I was running down that cow trail along the edge of the fence, right, literally right next to my uncle's house, because my great grandpa lived on the one side of that valley. One of my aunts lived in that valley, and one of my uncles lived on top of the hill on the other side of that valley. And then woods went right by my uncle's house, and that's where that cow trail was, because the cows would go by along that fence going up to the upper pasture. And I ran through there, never saw nothing but hoof prints, from the cattle in that mud. And then when I came back by a few minutes later, that's when I seen a footprint that was massively huge. It looked like a human's footprints. Man, I hauled ass back to Grandpa's house. And then, Grandpa, you weren't lying. He goes, nah, boy, I told you Momo's been spotted out there. And that's what I, knew Bigfoot for as a long time was Momo, because that's what we called him up there in St. Joe. And then I come down here to Southwest Missouri, and I get to working on these farms, bucking hay and working the irrigation system and mucking stalls and all that. Farm work. Doing that typical farm work stuff. And then I get to hearing them old timers spinning yarns about a booger. Which I was thinking, okay, booger, out of the nose. Why are you talking about a booger? A booger's a booger. It's nasty. Get it out. And it was like, nah, boy, a booger, a Bigfoot. I was like, oh, Momo. And that's when I learned about boogers. And they're throughout Missouri, from the northern regions to the southern regions. You hear stories of all these different types of Bigfoot. You hear stories of dogmen, of weird things. Like I grew up always knowing, hey, Corey, I always grew up knowing you don't whistle at night. You absolutely never whistle at night. And anybody in northern Missouri to southern Missouri will tell you the very same thing. And I'm pretty sure you probably heard that because you're from my neck of the woods as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that. I grew up with my grandparents saying, "You boys stay out of them woods once it gets dark. Boogers will get you." I grew up hearing that, and it's just something we grew up with. And it wasn't until I got a little older and realized what the hell they were talking about that I really started taking any kind of precautions. But for example, a great example of that is Douglas County, Missouri, right here down at Ava, Missouri. They call it Booger County.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is not new. I mean, this is stuff that's been seen in the Ozarks for a couple hundred years.
Oh yeah, I mean, you've been out to my property, and right where I had that thermal hit that I was showing you, we checked that out, and right there, which I didn't see it. You're the one that caught it. It was like, look, he's been laying there watching you, and I never knew it because I didn't think about looking at it, and you're the one that pointed that out to me. I went, holy crap, and that's right where I just had that thermal hit. I think was it 2 weeks before you came out. I had that thermal hit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's there. I mean, and that stuff's predominant everywhere. You was with me a couple winter. I was talking to you a couple winter ago's when I had that thing mimicking my dogs and messing with me when I was going back out to my truck.
Yeah.
And now I get constant things in the wintertime. You're seeing old man figures. You're hearing voices. You're hearing people talk like you and sound like you and calling things out. And I heard that mimic again last winter. It was off to the distance to the northeast of me, and a little ways away. That very same dog bark mimic that led me into what I had that experience with a couple of years ago, I heard again. And so that's where you and me got to talking. It's like, hey, you're not far from, Moon Valley. And I went, crap. Yeah, I didn't think about that. So when we're dealing with this stuff in our personal lives, I mean, a lot of stuff DA writes too. The things we experience in our personal lives goes into our books. This is where it comes from because literally we lived it. We live it. We hunt it. I mean, we hunt the things that go thump in the night. And that goes into our books, and that's what I love, and that's what makes you an awesome author, and that's why I wanted you. Not only because you're a great mentor for me, but that's why I wanted you as my first author on the very first show, is because we've experienced some of the same stuff. And you were right; you went on a paranormal investigation, first one that I ever recorded. You went on with me at the Shade Beaver Bar and Grill in Everton, Missouri, and there were some weird things going on that night. And yes, I may have tooted, and a ghost talked about it being stinky. That did happen. That is on video, and we laughed about it because I was back in the kitchen. You guys were at the other end of the bar. And I mean, that was a great investigation. I wish I had the equipment that I have now, because a lot of my
Oh, yeah.
equipment I lost when prior to my divorce, because a certain individual got rid of all my stuff. But even with what little bit of equipment we have, like my camcorder getting knocked off the stand, just sitting there and never messed with, and all of a sudden, boom, it drops down. And there's a lot of weird things that happen at night. Then we had that blue image in the window,
Hmm.
and we had that face on that wall. And this is type of stuff. If you get to reading our books, you're going to go, where does this stuff sound familiar, folks? This is where we get our ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
we
and that.
I was the one that took that picture that showed
Mm-hmm,
that face at that wall back there by the little DJ spot, and
mm-hmm,
it was not there. There was nobody over in there in that corner. And at the time I took the picture, it wasn't there. I didn't see it. It just showed up on the picture.
mm-hmm. And then when we talked about it on your shows, like we don't know if this is pareidolia or what. Well, when I was out there, what was that, 4 or 5 months ago, when I was back out there again, I snapped a picture of that same area from the same location. That face was not there. So that's where we can confirm now, saying that was an apparition. And that's the thing for like me as an investigator. I'll disprove it until I can't disprove it. And if I can confirm it, back it up and confirm it, then I'm going to back it up and confirm it. And that was one of the times I could confirm this was an apparition.
Yeah, we definitely caught something odd on camera.
Mm-hmm. We did. So, um, your next series, let's get into the meat and the taters of your Odin's Call series. What brought you to writing the Odin's Call series?
Well, I've heard dozens of stories from like the Dennis Martin story where the child was abducted in the '60s in great. I think it was Smoky Mountain National Park, and special forces showed up, which doesn't happen on search and rescue. You don't get a special forces team turning out on a search and rescue. But special forces showed up. Then there were stories of groups of Navy SEALs that were sent in to take care of an aggressive Bigfoot. There was a story of the sheriff in North Carolina where people that lived on farms were just disappearing, and he called in military, and they sent in a special forces unit. There are just dozens of stories of special forces units being called in to deal with aggressive cryptids, and they keep showing up. We've heard about them in Alaska, we've heard about them all across the United States, and that got me to thinking that there's got to be a dedicated response team for dealing with aggressive cryptids. I'm sure it's just not like they just call whoever's available, because they don't want every team out there to know about these things, so they would have a dedicated group. And so I kind of put on my thinking cap about the way, for my inspiration, Kolchak the Night Stalker and the X-Files and things like that, and thought, well, if there's a dedicated team, then they've got to have resources and they've got to have a structure. And that's how Codename Wild Hunt was born.
That's awesome. I kind of jumped out of order, and I just remembered that because I forgot all about Apex Predator. Which and so Codename Wild Hunt was the first series that got me drawn into you as an author, and we'll get to Apex Predator here in a moment. But I want to finish up the Codename Wild Hunt because I kind of jumped out of sequence there. But that's what drew me to it. My boss had told me about this, and I was like, well, I'll check it out. So I got on books. I bought the book, I listened to it, and that's what drew me in. Um, and then you had Cameron Buckner that was producing your book, so I started following Cameron Buckner on those, and that's what drew me in. And then shortly we started communicating and getting together and learning stuff. But that was it, because I was like, this rings home because I'm a 13-year-old vet. I've done 4 deployments. I love this. This is up my alley, and then I love cryptids too. So combining the two is really what drew me in, and that was the book that led me into knowing you, knowing your books, and now I've literally got every single one of your books. Well, it's on audio, but I got some of them that's paperback and hardback up here too, because I try to buy those as well, because Well, just because I got them on audio doesn't mean that won't fail at some point in time. And I want something to read. So the only way I'm gonna be able to do it is I got to have it on
Absolutely.
hardback or paperback.
I'd rather have a
So
physical copy personally.
well, for me, it's I love audio because yes, it's hard for me to read, very hard for me to read, but also anytime I'm in my truck, I'm listening to it. If I'm at work and I'm alone, I've got audio books playing. So I just that's what I listen. I don't listen to music anymore. I listen to books and catch up on podcasts that I might miss. That's what I'm constantly doing in my truck, in my vehicles at work, whatever I'm doing. It's that's all I listen to. So for me, that's why I love audiobooks. But let's be real, folks. Is audiobooks are great. I'll admit I don't make much money off audiobooks, but it gets them out, it gets you out there, and it's good for people like in my situation where, hey, this is great for me traveling. This is for me to take my mind off of what I'm doing and give me some good background noise that I absolutely love because I'm not a fan of modern music and. And that's why I love that. So it's handy, but you need a hardback because audio may go down at some point in time. So I encourage you guys not only buy his books on audio, buy them on paperback or buy them on hardback. I highly recommend any author that you absolutely love. I mean, maybe Robbie, me, D.A, Peter Gibbons. The list goes on of all these authors out there. Don't just buy their audio, buy their hardbacks and paperbacks as well because there will come a time you may need it. So that's what drew me into you was the code name Wild Hunt, which was my boss that turned me on to it.
I appreciate it, man.
Apex
Thank
Predator. Yeah, you're welcome. Apex Predator, which is another one that I absolutely. I mean, I ain't found a book yet you wrote that I don't love, uh, but Apex Predator and Gray Eagle. Now, so this is for all the Gray Eagle fans in the chat because I know I've seen the name a couple times. So yes, I'm getting to it. Apex Predator. What was the inspiration for Apex Predator?
Well, it's set in Lebanon. The first one is. It's set in the Lebanon area, and that's where I grew up. And I always wanted to tell a horror story based in those fields and places that I used to run and hunt. But the character of Jay Matoska is based off of my Uncle Buddy. Uncle Buddy was married to my Aunt Violet. He was married into the family. He wasn't my blood uncle, but he was, my uncle by marriage. He was full blood Cherokee, and I learned a lot about Native American lore and cryptids from Uncle Buddy. Learned a lot about tracking and hunting. He was like a second dad to me. And when I decided that I was going to set a book in that area, I knew I had to have him in it. And I'd actually already, paid homage to him, to White Bear in the Ragnarok books. He made an appearance in that. But I wanted to bring that character back, and I wanted to flesh him out and give him, more of a life at the time. And he's passed away now, and he suffered from Alzheimer's when he was for the last probably decade. So that was just my way of paying tribute to him. But I wanted to tell the story from the Native American lore perspective, and that's how Will Gray Eagle was born. I created that character. I wanted a cop that had ties to the Native American lore and was thereby connected to Jay Matoska. And so Will Gray Eagle just kind of naturally evolved out of the character of Jay Matoska. It was his grandfather. Will was a combat veteran. He was a cop, but he was also at odds with his own heritage. He didn't really believe the heritage anymore. He had spent so much time away from Native American influences, he kind of drifted away from it. And that story, when the dogmen attacked Lackland County, he comes face to face with his own heritage and has to confront it. And that's where that series evolved. That's where that series came from. And I got to introduce some really great characters, some of which are gone now, but a lot of them are still going strong. And every scene in that book is a place I've been. Right up to the final fight scene, which is at Tonka State Park. But every one of those places I knew intimately because they were places I spent my whole formative years growing up going.
I've been in several of them caves in Tonka. That's one of the things I absolutely love to do. I love caving. Caving is one of my absolute favorite things to do. And I spent a lot of time in them caves in Hawatonka. And you folks, you want a place to give you the heebie jibbies because you feel like you're being watched. Most of your caves in Missouri that way. Ha Ha Tonka. There's something about Ha Ha Tonka. Them caves out there. I don't know how many times I was looking at ledges above me, thinking there is something about to jump on me from up there,
Well,
and that
Haha
happens
is
a
kind of
lot.
unique when it comes to Missouri state parks. Let's say Bennett Springs State Park, for example. You can camp and fish 24 hours a day at Bennett Springs. You can drive through it at all hours of the night. Most of the other big state parks either have a campground or they've got fishing or backpacking, hiking, all of that. Ha Ha Tonka is the only one they lock it up at night. You can't get in there.
Yep.
They gate
Yep.
it off at night and
They
will
don't
not
like
let
you
people
by
be in there
that.
after dark. And there's a place
And they
just
don't
down
like
from
you
the
really.
ruins of the old castle called the Devil's Kitchen.
Yep. Yeah. And that old castle, they don't really like it too much. You getting around there and mucking around too much. And I can tell you that castle has a odd vibe to it.
They've got it
That
chained off now.
I've
You
been.
can't get down in it.
Thank you, Golf. I
The,
appreciate that, buddy.
the guy that built Haha Tonka, and for the life of me, off the top of my head, I can't remember his name, but he was a millionaire in the 1920s here in Missouri. And he brought in stonemasons from Ireland and Scotland to build that. He wouldn't let anyone local work on that castle, and then he sent them back when he was done. He didn't want anybody local knowing the layout or anything. Rumored that it was built on a massive cavern with the stair access to go down into the cavern. He made his money off of power generation plants, and the dam at Lake of the Ozarks, which was built in the 1930s, is a massive power generation dam. And again, this is a guy that made his money off power generation. He fought tooth and nail to keep that dam from being built because he didn't want to flood that valley. So we're pretty sure that his cave, the cave that he used, is underwater now. And at the time of his death, he had the largest occult library west of the Mississippi. And upon his death, that library was crated up and sealed up and donated to the library at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. And that was in the 1930s. And to this day, they still will not let you access those boxes.
Yeah, for
Almost
me,
100
I can
years
tell
later,
you
you
kind
still
of the.
can't access it.
Oh yeah, and for me, anytime I go up around that castle, the heavy jibbies I got is very tied to the Fae. I can't explain it, but you can feel a strong presence of the Fae in that area. But you can also feel a very strong presence of something else in that area that it's hard to explain too. So it's amazing what's there, And I
There's
mean,
a
this
dark
is no
presence there.
joke. Oh yeah, you get in them caves down there in Hawatonka, a lot of them have overhangs that you can literally climb up. Sometimes they're 10 feet, sometimes they're 5 feet, sometimes they're higher than that. But you can literally crawl up there and lay and look down on the pass below you in them caves, and you literally get the feeling that something is going to jump on you from that cave. So when you was talking about them fighting that stuff in that location, I don't want to give too much of away. Uh, that rang home for me because I literally have experienced that feeling while in them same caves. So everything you talked about in there, I was like, "Holy crap! I know exactly what he's writing about." So it's
Robbie looked it
amazing.
up. The guy's name was Robert Snyder,
Oh, thank
and
you.
he
Oh,
he
oh.
was a Mason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I remember him being a Mason. Yeah, Mason. Yeah. So I mean that's brought. So what brought you? I know you do a lot of the Hotomataneo in your
Mhm.
books, Codename Wild Hunts, Lakeview Man, Apex Predator, uh, Heart of Iron.
Mhm.
The list goes on. Here recently, What was your inspiration for making so many Hotamateneos in there?
Well, in the original stories, when the cavalry was pushing west and going after the Native Americans, the Cheyenne were the first to create a military society called the Hotametaneo, or the Dog Soldiers. And they were fierce, incredibly fierce, well disciplined warriors. And because of their success, other tribes like the Lakota, the Dakota, and most of the Plains tribes either formed their own or joined them. And it was even said that the strongest of the Dog Soldiers could change forms. So I blended that legend in to the apex predator legend, that they were remnants of the original Hotametaneo fighting evil, fighting these the Ulonga Doglala, which was the Cherokee word for the dog men. So I wanted to bring not only the real legend of the Hotametaneo in, but I wanted to shape that legend to help affect that entire story. And it was said that when they would fight, if there was only one left, he would tie a leather lead around himself and then stake it to the ground and fight there till either everybody around him was dead or he was. He would, stand his ground, staked to the ground, and not retreat. And in that spirit, I wanted to, wanted the modern, my version of the Hotametaneo to be that type of warrior, fearless, unbreakable, unending, with that kind of discipline. And when I first started, I'd originally thought I was just going to make Will remember the lore and become the Hotametaneo. But then I decided, no, I think it would be better as a group. And I think the choice of making it a group was much better. And you'll notice in the Apex Predator series, people will join and others will die, and then others will join and then a few others will die. It's because what they face is that dangerous. So the others will rise to continue the fight.
Heck yeah. And that's not just in native culture, Lakota or Cheyenne culture or any of that, because there's many different tribes that had them. But you look at Norse mythology and Dane and Swede and stuff like that, you got the Ulfanar. Now, they're most commonly known as berserkers, which is wrong. Berserkers were completely something different. The Ulfanar were a class of their own. And that's a type. In Celtic mythology, you have werebeast. And, I say werebeast because it wasn't just wolves. It was whatever skin they could get their hands on, which is very similar to what I call an SW, because I don't like to say the name too much. But SW means skinwalker to all the new subscribers. So when I say SW, that's what I'm talking about. And if you study Celtic mythology,
I've got a friend who's Navajo, and he only refers to them as coyotes. He won't even say that.
Yeah. So, I don't like to say the name a whole lot, but this is throughout ancient history. So when I'm hearing these books, and this is kind of common. I'm leading up to your last book that I just listened to, because of what plays in this book, and that is there's different types. There's not just one type out there. There's different ways of becoming it. There's different legends behind them, different types. I mean, this is stuff it is. And the last book I want to talk about is Nightmare Hunter. And the story behind the Nightmare Hunter and what was involved in that book is the reason why I kind of wanted to bring that in before we brought the book up. What was your inspiration for Nightmare Hunter?
The original inspiration for it was Kolchak the Night Stalker, that 1970s TV series. That's the hat. It was about a reporter in Chicago that was investigating bizarre stories, and he kept investigating these strange stories and turning out they were real monsters. But that show only lasted, I think it was like 11 episodes, and there were 2 movies and like 11 or 12 episodes in 1974. And then they didn't do anymore. But it was the real world inspiration for the X-Files, which ran for years. But Kolchak the Night Stalker was the original inspiration for that. And I wanted to take that same kind of premise and bring it into the modern age. So I created a character He was an investigative. He ran a blog about strange occurrences, and he was an investigative journalist with his own blog. And he started getting involved investigating these weird stories, and they were true. And so he was getting in over his head because he was running into these things. And I've already got a second one of that series in the works. It's called Curse of the Rougarou. Going to be set down in Louisiana. And it's continuing with that same reporter digging into stories and sticking his nose into something he wasn't ready for.
I'll tell you, another favorite one of my authors is Jack LaFontaine. And Jack LaFontaine writes books about the Rougarou and other stuff as well. But it's amazing that the stuff that you hear when you read these other authors' books and how they're different, but how they're similar as well. For me, like my inspiration for Grimson was based off of a old style military unit that hunts these creatures, right? All the way up to modern time. And of course, with modern times, and I had to reason why I had to write it a certain way that I did in book one. And for those of you who read it, it's going to know what I'm talking about here. It says that you'll run into others like you, because I can't just write a book like that that's going, it's just him and nobody else. Truth be told, there's going to be others out there to come throughout history. Even with Grimson's long extended life, there's going to be other units. And so whenever I'm writing something that similar, I'm kind of getting into a certain little one of my favorite characters. I've got many favorite characters yours that you write about, but one of my favorite ones is Gideon. I absolutely love the shit out of Gideon. Gideon is one of my favorite. Besides Martin, I love Gideon. And so I was kind of wondering how the inspiration for Gideon came about.
There was a book series in the late 80s written by Barry Sadler. He was a former Green Beret, and he was the one that sang that song, The Ballad of the Green Berets. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that song. Barry was, like I said, he was a Green Beret in Vietnam. And he wrote he wrote a book series called Casca, the Eternal Mercenary. And that's really what kind of gave him the idea for Gideon. But Barry also wrote a bunch of other books. If you ever get a chance to read any books, they're very, very good, quick reads, high action books with a lot of military. So they're good reads. I mean, I really enjoy his books. He's passed away now. I think his son is still writing some of those books. But I liked the idea of Casca, and I really don't want to give away the origin of Gideon for anybody that hasn't read the books. But Gideon was inspired by that character, and Gideon is much older than people think he is.
Oh, yeah. Corey has a question for you, D.A. It says, have you ever heard about the dog soldier's magic have been passed down onto another younger family member before they die?
Supposedly, the dog soldiers still exist. The cavalry thought they wiped them out, that they hunted them all down and wiped them out. But from what I hear, there are still secret societies of the dog soldiers today. So, yeah, the magic's still there.
Yeah. I'm going to reply. Actually, being some, you're welcome, Bounty. I'm glad I can help in any way that I can, giving information out. I think history is very important, and the truth behind what these things is that we write about and that we look for and we go out and investigate, I believe is something that's important. So you're very welcome on that. Last of the Dogmen, that was a good one. Yeah,
it's a good movie.
Yeah, Last of the Dog.
William Nighthawk was telling me that they're still dog soldiers. That they're just, you wouldn't know where to find them if you weren't part of the nations. So it's not like you or I could go out to the Lakota reservation or the Cheyenne reservation and ask. We're just probably going to get told to either piss off or not even answered. William could go out there, and of course, I'm sure he would be either recruited or find out anything you wanted to know. But the fact that we're not part of the tribes, we we would never be told. But I firmly believe they're still out there. I believe the society still exists, and I think there's probably a lot more of them than we realize.
Oh yeah. And I have to, dang it, Robbie. Now you got that song stuck in my in my head. Fallen soldiers from the sky,
That whole
fearless
album,
men.
that whole
I
album is
love
good.
that. Yes. Roxanne wants to know what clicks in your brain to give you get your stories you want to write.
Sometimes these stories start with nothing more than a single line of dialogue. Entire scenes get inspired by little things like "always pack for dragons" that'll pop in my head, and then I'll come up with a scene. But a lot of times, like for example, Apex Predator, um, not Blood Moon, the third one. Um, is it Hunter's Moon? Yeah, Hunter's Moon. Set it's set down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and I when I did that one, it yeah it I no I'm sorry, it is Blood Moon that was set. I got that backwards. Anyway, I got 35 books out. I get them screwed up in my head. But the one that's set down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, that one actually came to me because of a story that I'd read about an officer that had a Bigfoot attack his SUV with his canine in it. And I won't say what county it is here in Missouri, but it's not that county. It wasn't in Arkansas. It was here in Missouri. They said something tried to reach in and take his dog out of the back seat, and he ended up getting the hell out of there. Um, but that's what inspired that prologue of that story, and then the rest of it just grew from there.
Yeah. And that's good. And let's see. Nope, we still got Dark Frontier. I was trying to remember what series I may have forgotten, so I'm trying to. I did jump out of order earlier, but that's amazing, and the fact that all this comes about, and how that pops in your head on that stuff, and it's great. And the thing is people can go back and look up encounters, and they're going to go, oh man, I remember DA writing about this, or I remember Robbie writing about this, or I remember ED writing about this. And that's what's great. Like I always say, everything in my book is actual location, actual places you can look up and find. Even my sci-fi books, my planets, I'll give you what NASA calls them before I tell you what I call them in the books. And you can literally look up that NASA code and find that planet. And what it's described about that planet is what's in the book. Um, Dark Frontier. What was your inspirations for Dark Frontier? I love westerns.
Well, um, when you more you dig into these creatures like Bigfoot and Dogman, the more you realize, especially Bigfoot, but same as with Dogman, you find that lore goes back hundreds of years. And then you read stories like homesteaders dealing with creatures during the 1800s as they pressed west. And I got to thinking, well, how would they fight these things during the the period when everybody was wagon trains going west, the Santa Fe Trail, the Oregon Trail? How would they deal with these things? And then I got to thinking, the story of Old Green Eyes from the Civil War about the Bigfoot like creature that was coming out on the battlefield at Chickamauga and taking bodies off the battlefield. And I get to thinking of that. I'm like, well, okay, so how would they have engaged that during the Civil War? And then I started looking up Civil War weapons, and I'm a history buff too. And I'm thinking, man, with those old cap and ball guns, I would hate it to take one of those things on. And it really started because of a real historical event where Civil War soldiers tried to engage one of these things, and that's where I came up with the idea for the Nightmare Hunters. It was based on the character Declan Kane returning from the Civil War and running into a group of these creatures and winding up getting recruited in the U.S. Marshals' first attempt to stop them.
Heck yeah, and that's interesting, and I'm going to take a stab here because you probably do the same thing I do, and for me, like when I'm writing historical fiction, cryptid horrors, uh, most of mine is based back in times there's no guns. You don't have that type of stuff. So I mean, it's sword, it's axe, it's knife, it's hand to hand. So whenever I'm trying to write a scene where they're fighting these things, I'm like, what would happen in this scenario? Because you got to be up close and personal. And do you find yourself doing that very same thing when it comes to that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. When I like with the Heart of Iron, I mean that's all swords and bows and that kind of thing. And and there are times in even in Codename Wild Hunt when it goes to melee. I mean, when you run out of ammo or those things get in on top of you, you've got to fight with everything you got. So I find myself trying to block out the scenes, like for example, just right here on my desk, I've got a Sayok tomahawk. I mean, I've it just happens to be laying on my desk along with several handguns and a couple of knives. I will use props like that to block out the scene. Like how would they react? How would they spin it? And then I describe those motions in the books, because if you got something coming in on you, say from your there you go, you got something coming in on you from on your right hand side, and you're out of ammunition, you're going to grab whatever you can grab to defend yourself with. And then I just use those motions that I would use for an attack, or how you would throw something, how you would snap your wrist, or how you would lay the knife. Well, for example, where is that? There it is. For example, there's a huge difference in combat holding a knife. I've got to get it on camera. Holding a knife like this and holding it like this. So it all depends on who it is, the knife style they use to fight with. I try to describe it accurately. I've studied knife fighting. I've studied knife throwing. I used to throw hatchets. So I've done a lot of these things myself. So I try to make them, and not only as realistic as possible, but make the cause and effect, basically as really as possible too. Because if you hit somebody with a really good sharp knife, there's going to be blood. It's going to fly. You hit an artery, it's going to spray. You have to not only be able to describe the act itself, but the aftermath.
Yeah. And one thing I do, like when I'm writing a historical fiction, regardless if it's just a historical fiction or historical fiction cryptid horror, I research the military tactics, the military weapons of that time, the lingo, the ranks. I mean, all that stuff. Like, I didn't realize until you pointed it out. I started a new book idea called Hispana or Legios Hispana or Ninth Hispana, which is based off a journal entry from the Primus Palace of the Ninth Hispana. And so, I mean, I was all excited to talk about it. And he was like, yeah, that's a basic. I was like, ah, crap. I didn't even think about that. But, you're constantly looking up the ranks of that time, the formations, what tactics they used, what weapons they used, how they would approach. I mean, there's a lot of research when you're, especially because we're not from the history. We can only read about history. So, for me, I know for sure I'm constantly doing a lot of research into that type of stuff.
Yeah, I research not only correct period dress. I've read Roman tactics. I've read Roman commands, and I try to use the Latin commands when I can. Like trying to think of one of the commands. Ad testudinum, form the testudo. There's just a whole bunch. Ad dextrum, depone. Turn, meaning turn left now. That kind of thing. You have to really not only get immersed in the lingo itself, but you need to try to get in their headspace, because men that stood the shield wall of the Roman legion don't think like men today. I mean, when you stood the shield wall, it was all about not letting down the man to your left and right. You had to hold. Same with the military. You're not necessarily fighting for the patch on your shoulder, or you're not fighting for king and country. You're fighting for the guys on either side of you. So it's not the same mentality that most people would even understand. But I try to depict that. I try to show these guys were true warriors in every sense of the word, and that these were the discipline of the Roman legion was legendary. So these guys would move as a unit. They would think as a unit, and I mean reacting instantly. Like I would almost compare modern. I would almost compare the discipline of the ancient Roman legion to the Marine Corps silent drill platoon. That discipline is crisp. It's exact. It's beautiful to look at, and that would be the discipline of the Legion. If they told them to turn, that entire formation turned like a wheel. It was just magnificent to watch. And I try to depict that in the writing and to show these characters not just modern interpretations of an old character, but try to give them the lifestyle and the mannerisms that they truly would have had.
Yeah. And I do the same thing, in Saga Grimson, even though, yes, Grimson is a Norse. He's a Norse warrior. But he's a student of history as well. So like in book one, I don't want to give too much away. Something happens to Grimson in a certain unit. And because of how it happened to him, he had to change up his normal Dringer style of fighting a shield wall, and reflects back to a certain phrase that you just said, and that's the testudo. In Latin, testudo means turtle, to form a turtle shell, testudo. But you're constantly, like, he's always learning, hey, okay, this may work for this, but this don't work for this. And we got to change this up because, man, this that whooped our butts,
Well, the Norse shield wall is not the same as the Roman shield wall.
Nope.
Different types of formation, different disciplines. The Roman shield wall was probably the most destructive formation of its day. Nothing stood against the shield wall, and when Rome was in its prime, they beat everybody they went up against. But how the Roman legion actually fell was corruption and politics from within. When they started changing the standards of the Legion and adding people into the Legion that had no business being there, the Legion fell from rot within. It never fell to an outside foe. It fell from within.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is. And if you notice, if you're a student of history, you're going to see that every great civilization, that is the same cause of their downfall. That is throughout history of any kind of great empire, civilization. It's always fell from within. So that's something that I like too, because, sorry, these allergies, I'm glad they're going away, but they're still there. But so these different tactics and stuff, is constant. So like in the Legios Ninth Hispana that I started, I did a lot of research. Because it takes place in Britannia, and so what was the people like during that time? What was that? And that makes it hard because you got to go, okay, this is what Holly Scrooge told us. This is how they talked or act, but how did they actually talk and act? So when you're trying to, that is a hurdle that for me as a writer, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it is for most of them, is you got to try to go, how do I not make this Holly Scrooge, but also make this as authentic as possible? And I take it that's probably what you do in yours as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. From the way the people spoke, to mannerisms, to the food they would eat, to the clothes they would wear, I try to make everything as true to history as I can. Because really, as a writer or as a historian, your job is not to interpret history. Your job is to show it. And I would feel that we were just doing a huge disservice to the history of it if we modernized it. To me, that's just you can't do that. History is there to be learned from. History is there to teach us lessons. We can't colorize it through the lens of modern history or modern values, because it's not our modern values. The values were very different back then. The styles were very different back then. We have to look at history for what it is to learn lessons to what not to repeat. So history should make you uncomfortable. History should teach you a lesson, and it should inspire you to not want to repeat the mistakes they made. There's an old saying that says, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. But those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly while these idiots repeat the mistakes in the past.
Heck yeah. So we are, wow, this actually flew by. We're at that 2 hour mark.
Nice.
What's some closing thoughts on this, on writing, and what kind of tips can you give to the audience out there that wants to be an inspiring author? Because I mean, and you, like I said earlier, has been a great inspiration and mentor for me. So I mean, I'm truly blessed that we got to know each other, and I've been able to pick your brains and evolve my writing due to your help. So
My
what would
pleasure.
you some advice? Yeah.
If you're planning to be a writer, the first and foremost, you need to be a reader. If you don't read other novels, if you don't read other writers, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because every writer should constantly be polishing their own craft. But write what you know, write what you love, and if you don't know, find someone who does. Because if you and also if you don't love what you're writing, no one else is going to either. Uh, First and foremost, nobody writes a bestseller right out the gate. Just like nobody steps up to the plate in baseball and hits a grand slam on the first pitch of their first at bat in the major leagues. That just doesn't happen. So don't swing for grand slam territory. Write for yourself. Write, even if you write badly, just write, even if it's just for you. And write what you love to read. Write what you want. Write the stories you want to read, and then you will find your audience. And even if you don't want to share it with anybody, just use it as practice. Rough drafts don't have to be perfect; they just have to be written.
Hmm. Heck yeah. For me, man, is don't let your brain get in the way of you doing something you love. I started out with short stories, and then I went from erotica short stories, and then I went to being published in a magazine. Now I'm writing books. Um, and there's so many times that I've written a great story, needed a lot of work done to it, but wrote a great story and didn't do anything with it because I was like, nobody's going to buy this. You cannot mine blank yourself. I'm trying not to use the word that we use in the Marines. You can't mind blank yourself. We'll just leave it at that, and not do it. Just to put it out there, give it a try. And I mean, my first book, you'll see a difference night and day between my first book and the latest one I put out. You're always going to evolve. You're always going to improve, and eventually it'll catch on. And you'll be surprised how much your mess up books, once you get out there, become more popular than your current ones because people like that type of stuff. That's real writing. That is something that naturally happens. So, definitely, I encourage you, if you want to be a writer, write, give it a shot. You know, and I agree. I mean, I've only got 7 books published. I'm still, growing. I'm still doing stuff, and that's what happens with it. So, Da, I thank you so much for coming on, being my first guest. I'm going to
Hey,
be reaching
anytime, man.
out to and some others. Like I said, this is something I want to try to do once a month, just because of my work schedule. So this is not going to be a weekly deal for now, at least. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Once again, look up Da Roberts on Amazon. Follow his authors page. Looking him up on YouTube, follow his Nightmare Hunter podcast. You will not be disappointed. You will be entertained. So definitely go out there and give him a follow. So until tomorrow, folks, with Campfire Chats and their guest, I hope you have encounters that you would like to share. I'll see you then. And as always, everybody, peace, love, and blessings. We'll see you all later. Goodbye.
Good night.